This lesson is building HTML5 web forms. In this lesson, you'll learn some of the basics of creating forms on your web page. Specifically, you'll learn how to add a form to your page and to set the form properties as well. You'll also learn how to add form controls, such as a text field or checkbox. Before we begin, you'll want to create a site for your BB14 lessons folder. Once that's created, open formbase.html. Now, we don't have time to create all of the form fields on the form, but we'll create the form and show you a couple of simple elements. First, let's access all the form controls that you can add to your form. From the Insert panel, choose Form from the drop-down menu to display the various form elements, including text, email, password, URL, and telephone. These last four fields are HTML5 elements that have been added to the Insert menu in Dreamweaver CC. But the most important element is the form element. With this element, we will create a form in which we can add our form controls. Before we add our form, let's click and place our cursor in front of the word name in our document. Let's press enter and go back up to the blank line so that we can create our form element. Click the form button, and Dreamweaver will add the form element to our design. The form is represented by the red outline. As you can see in the tag selector, our form was created with the ID form1. Let's rename that to something more suitable. For example, contact form. This information will be useful later on when submitting the form. While we're on the subject of submitting a form, let's go over a few important concepts. The action field represents the most important part of the form. This specifies what action will be performed when the form is submitted. Dreamweaver doesn't really help you with the act of processing form data, but it does allow you to build the user interface in the form of adding controls to your form. The act of processing the form data has to be handled outside of Dreamweaver, and how that is done is dependent upon your hosting situation and is outside the scope of this lesson. But I can give you a few examples of what that might look like. A typical action will point to a file that will handle the form processing. For example, one action might be http://www.mysite.com/submit.php. PHP is a scripting language which is used to handle form processing and return results to the user. You might also see .asp for active server pages, or even CGI. Since we're not actually submitting anything with this form, we're going to go ahead and remove that action. Next, we're going to go ahead and select all of the form placeholder information from the word name all the way down to send us a picture of your garden. I'm going to press Command or Control X to cut that information, place my cursor in the form, and Command or Control V to paste it. We now have our placeholders within our form, and we can begin adding our form fields. The most common form control is the text control. We'll select the placeholder text name and delete it, and then choose the text button from the Insert panel. This inserts a text field with the label text field, which again isn't very useful. So we will name this mailing list name. We will also change the label so that it simply reads name. Click on the text control and let's go down to the properties inspector where I'd like to point out some of the new options available in HTML5 text controls. For instance, these checkboxes in the lower left-hand corner can specify whether the control has autofocus. The autofocus property will give this text input keyboard focus when the form loads. Additionally, I can specify that a field is required or read-only, and I can turn off the browser's autocomplete functionality. By using the HTML5 required attribute, I can take advantage of the browser's built-in JavaScript functionality to ensure that this field is populated before the form is submitted. Previously, this had to be done with custom JavaScript. Additionally, I can use a placeholder attribute to specify instructions for the user. Enter your name. However, the placeholder element isn't available in all browsers, which may require you to use a polyfill or some other JavaScript method to reproduce this functionality. Next, let's add some radio buttons indicating the membership status. Let's highlight the placeholder text and delete it. And scroll down to our radio button group. In our radio group dialog box, we can specify the name of our buttons. Mailing list membership. And we'll replace the two default entries with values representing our membership. In this case, member and non-member. Click OK, and we now have a radio button group where the user can choose one of two options. Finally, let's add a submit button so that we can submit the form. Place your cursor at the end of the last line of text and press enter. And choose submit button from the form options in the insert panel. Dreamweaver inserts the submit button into our form with the name submit and the value submit. Next to the form action, this button is perhaps the next most important item in the form. Pressing the submit button will trigger the form action and submit the form for the user. With HTML5 elements, the submit button will also trigger the browser's built-in form validation, verifying that any required fields were populated and that any special formulated fields, such as email and telephone number, are properly formatted. And that's it for now. In this lesson, you learned how to create a simple form and add form fields to it. This lesson was building HTML5 web forms.